Welcome back everyone. For today's video we are going to be taking a look at the grand final of the Speed Chess Championship being held between myself and the 5-time world chess champion Magnus Carlsen. Now, with the exception of 2021 when Magnus lost in the semifinals to Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, every other year that Magnus has competed and I have competed, we've met in the finals. So what that means is Magnus has won twice in 2016 and 2017, and of course I am the 5-time defending champion, having won in 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So let's jump right into the action. So first game we're going to look at is the second game of the match with a score half-half, with both of us having drawn the first game. So in this second game of the match, Magnus opens with e4. I play e5. He goes knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and now I decide to play the classic Berlin with knight to f6. Now here Magnus decides to play move d3. I go bishop c5, and he plays this move bishop a4. Now this move is sort of a symbol of what the match would turn into, which is we both came with some very slight ideas prepared, nothing super exciting or fancy, but just some basic ideas to get through the match. So Magnus goes bishop a4. I castle here. He decides to castle, and now I play this move rook e8. Magnus plays c3, and I play this move bishop f8. Now this position of course has been played many times, but since it was a little bit of a surprise for me, I wasn't really sure what to do. Now if I'd been prepared for this line, probably I would have played this move d5, trying to open up the center of the board, but again, not being ready for it in a blitz situation, I didn't want to play something super complicated. I'd rather try to play for some basic opening ideas. So here I go bishop f8. Magnus plays the move rook e1. I go h6 here, stopping the move bishop g5. Magnus plays the move knight bd2, and now I play this move d6, and here Magnus goes d4, building this nice classic big white center. Here I go bishop d7. Magnus plays h3, stopping any ideas with bishop g4 to pin the knight on f3, and now I play this move g6. Now the reason behind playing g6 here is I simply wanted to create the fianchetto because the bishop really has no scope on this long diagonal towards the pawn on d6, c5, b4, a3. So here Magnus plays bishop c2, and now I play the move bishop g7, and Magnus decides to go knight f1. Very classic maneuvering in both the Italian and the Spanish, where you want to put this knight on either the g3 or the e3 square. Here I play the move queen e7, and now Magnus goes knight g3, and I play this move queen f8, simply trying to keep this rook on the open file, all the while protecting the pawn on h6 against any threats. Magnus goes bishop e3, and now I play rook a d8, putting both of the rooks in the center of the board and hoping at some point to play d5 and open everything up. So Magnus plays queen d2 here, and now I go knight to a5, trying to play knight c4 to fork the queen and the bishop, and Magnus plays this move b3, cutting this knight c4 move off. So here I play c5, Magnus goes rook a d1, and now I play this move b6, trying to create some play in the center of the board. So Magnus plays the move queen to e2 here, and now I decide to take on d4. Now it's very, very tricky in such situations because time is pretty even here. Both of us have 3 minutes on the clock, but you're not really sure what you're doing. So I decide to trade and release the tension on the center of the board, and now I go knight c6. Magnus plays d5, and I play this move knight to e5. Now again, it's very difficult because a lot of Magnus's moves are very easy here, whereas I have to use my time and come up with ideas. And in blitz specifically, or even bullet, I guess to a lesser extent, it's very, very critical if you can to have simple moves to play and be able to react to whatever your opponent does, as opposed to having to come up with the ideas. So I play knight e5, Magnus trades knights, and now I take with the rook. He goes queen to a6, and I have this very nice move, rook to e7, essentially guarding the pawn on a7. Now you're probably thinking, well, wait, white can just take the pawn. But if white takes this pawn, there's bishop g4 here, creating the classic fossil, and white will lose either the queen or the rook. If you move the rook, I take the queen. If you take the bishop, you lose the queen, and if you take the pawn, you lose this rook here. And white is still probably a little bit better in this position, but it's definitely not what you're aiming for. So Magnus plays a4 here. I go bishop c8 to kick the queen away from a6, and Magnus plays this move queen f1. After queen to f1, I play knight to d7 here, simply trying to do something in the center of the board, but Magnus plays f4, stopping this knight e5 maneuver. Here I play h5, and this move is played sort of out of desperation by me here because I'm looking for a plan. I'm down nearly a minute on the clock, and Magnus has both e5 and f5 lurking here, and due to that, I'm trying to play quick moves. So I play h5 here after 2 seconds, and Magnus correctly plays this great move e5. Now after d takes e5, he goes f5, and this is a very classic structure that you can have out of many different King's Indians or Ben Onis. I guess I'll give you one basic example just so you guys understand what I'm referring to. In the Ben Oni, you get the structure with e4 and d5 versus c6 d5, and something like, let's say, g6, f4 here, knight f3, castles, bishop d3, just making some random moves. And at some point there always are ideas like e5 takes and f5 here, and after like knight e8, knight e4, white gets this great center with the pawns on d5 and f5 and the knight on e4. Now mind you, this exact position is not, you'll see the bar says black is winning, but it's about the specific concept where white gets d5 and f5 versus c5 and e5 with a knight on e4. So back to the game. As we get to this position after takes and f5, you'll notice we have exactly what I referred to, the pawns on c5 and e5, bishop blocked by the pawn, and white's knight going to e4. So here I play e4, trying to open up this diagonal, maybe hoping to stack the rooks on the e file. Magnus plays knight takes e4, and I go rook d to e8 here, and now Magnus finds this very nice move, bishop to f4. Now at this point I was feeling a little bit sort of slightly confident that maybe I would survive, because I have the double stack on the e file, the bishop, the knight, and the rook are under some attack. But bishop f4 is a very, very nice move here, because when I take on f5, now white has this move knight to d6, forking the rook and the bishop and the pawn on f5. Now in this position, I simply blundered here. Low on the clock, I played bishop a6 after a short thing, and this is simply a blunder which loses on the spot, but the position is still quite miserable after I trade all the rooks on e1. Let's say I play knight f6 here, white can go queen g3, a lot of pressure towards the bishop and the pawn on c8 and f5 respectively. Knight on d6, super well placed here, and just in general it's very hard to play, especially with no time on the clock. So I played bishop a6, simply blundering rook takes rook here, because now if I play bishop takes queen, there's rook takes rook, knight guards the rook, white will win this queen on f8, and white has 2 rooks for the queen here, and eventually I'll lose a queen for 1 rook, and it will be a huge material deficit. So after Magnus plays rook takes e7, I resign the second game of the match, and Magnus goes ahead by a score of 1.5 to half. So in the rest of the 5+1 portion, Magnus would actually start off very strong. He would win 2 games and have 2 draws, be up 3-2 before I think actually 4-2 rather. He'd win 2 games and have a couple of draws before I finally was able to strike back and win a game. At the end of the 5+1 portion, Magnus was leading by a score of 5-4. Now I felt pretty good at that point in the match, simply because my read of the situation is just try to keep it very close until bullet, because I figure in bullet I should have the best chances. So I lose this first game, or the second game of the match. I'm down, but let's move to the next game, which is game number 10 of the match. This is the first game of the second segment of the match, the 3+1, with me trailing by a score of 5-4. So in this game, Magnus decides here to play the move d4. Now definitely a little bit of surprise, because throughout the 5+1, Magnus was pretty much exclusively playing e4. So he goes d4. So I play knight to f6, Magnus plays c4, I play e6, he goes knight to f3, and now I play this move b6, which is the classic Queen's Indian defense. Now, as I've said in previous videos, this is a system that I've not played a lot. I played it briefly during the 2016 Canada's tournament in Moscow, Russia. I played it during the FIDE World Cup this past August in Baku, Azerbaijan, but it's not a system that I've played all that much. So Magnus goes g3, I play bishop to b7, and now he plays bishop g2. Also, for anyone who's wondering, Magnus had already played the Queen's Indian in an earlier game in the 5+1, where he played the classic Petrosian system with queen c2 and e4. That game would end, I believe, in a Magnus victory, but he wasn't actually better in that game. So first game of the 3+1, he changes up by playing this g3 system, and now I go bishop b7, he plays bishop to g2, and now I play bishop b4 check. Now here Magnus plays the move bishop to d2, we swap, and I castle, knight c3, knight e4, queen d3, and I take. Now of course I have done videos in recent times, you've probably seen this position, especially in the video when I played Dmitry Andreikin in the recent qualifier for the next Chess Champions Tour event, but it is what it is. So we get knight g5, knight e4, of course white takes with the knight. I mentioned before, bishop takes e4, takes queen e4, looks like white is winning, but after takes, queen c6, queen takes a8, knight c6, queen b7, and knight to d4. Black has enough counterplay for the sacrificed rook. So Magnus plays knight takes e4, I play knight to c6, and now Magnus castles, and I play this move f5, knight to c3, and I go f4. Now again, I played this against Andreikin quite recently, so I had looked at these various setups, and I felt that f5, f4 was one of the best setups here, because basically what it does is it stops white from ever going f4 and e4. In fact, in one of the games against Andreikin in the Chess Champion Tour playing, he actually did go f4 followed by e4. He got a nice white center, and I did actually lose that game. So I play f4 to stop Magnus from being able to go f4 and e4, and now Magnus plays this move queen to d2, and here I go queen f6, guarding the pawn on f4 while potentially spying the pawn on d4 at the same time. So here Magnus plays rook a d1, and now I play this move knight to a5, attacking the pawn on c4 but also hoping to trade off these light square bishops. So here Magnus trades the bishops, and now he plays this move e3. Now this is a very committal move from Magnus here. Actually in this game he was very slow throughout the opening. You see he used nearly 40 seconds to play this move, and I had a very tough decision here because on the one hand I'm up a minute and a half here. I'm up 90 seconds on the clock, but f3 is a very committal move, and the problem is if f3 is not actually working, white can go like e4 e5, rook e1 rook e4. All of white's moves are essentially reactions to this f3 move. So I spent a lot of time here before finally deciding, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to play f3, and I'm going to go for the classic lolly checkmate. One sample variation, let's say queen c1, queen f5, queen b1, and queen h3, and now we get the lolly checkmate on g2. So Magnus plays e4 here in this position, and now I go queen g6 with a couple of ideas in mind. First of all, I have queen g4 and queen h3 trying to create the lolly checkmate. I also have knight d6 to fork the pawns on c4 and e4, and even beyond that I can also maybe play h5 h4 as well. Now here Magnus plays h4, which is a surprisingly bad move. Computer actually wants h3, which feels very risky because frankly after queen h5 king h2 it feels like after rook to f6 black will lift the rook and checkmate on the h file, but in fact white is still okay after this very cold-blooded move rook to h1 here, because now if I go rook h6 white just retreats the king to g1 and says, what's your plan? Rook guards the pawn, and white has this nice big center with these three pawns, and f3 down the road can become a weakness as well. So Magnus instead plays h4 with the idea that if I play queen g4 here, white can go king h2, stopping the checkmate, and eventually Magnus's hope is to play something like rook e1, and then something like knight d1, maybe something like knight d6, queen d3, rook f6, and knight to e3, kicking the queen out of the center, or not out of the center but away from the g4 square. So after h4 I play this move knight to d6, forking the pawns on e4 and c4, and here Magnus plays this move queen to d3, which allows me to play this very nasty move rook to f4. Now rook to f4 is an excellent move because I'm threatening to take on h4, and now white can no longer slide the king to h1 or h2. So if you go to h2 I sack the rook with rook takes h4. If you take, it's mate on g2. And if you play king g1 for example, now I go queen h5 threatening mate on h1, and it's the same problem. After takes, check, king h2, I have queen g2 checkmate as well. So after rook f4 it's really scary, and here Magnus plays rook fe1, trying to create an escape square for the king potentially. And also if I take this pawn on h4, suddenly after queen takes f3 white is very much back in the game because all the mate threats towards this h1 or g2 square are simply gone without this pawn on f3. So I don't really want to do that. So here I decide to play rook a f8, basically supporting the rook on f4, threatening to capture the pawn while guarding the pawn on f3. So here Magnus plays rook to e3, and this is a huge mistake. Now I was very pleased with my time usage because when Magnus played rook e3 here he's down 40 seconds, but I have a very difficult decision here. If I play rook takes h4, which is a very obvious human move, there's rook takes pawn, rook takes, queen takes, knight takes e4, and black has an extra pawn in this endgame, but against a player like Magnus Carlsen I'm not so sure I would win this. Computer obviously would win this with black very easily, up a pawn, but in endgame with only rooks on the board and having to go something like rook g4, king g2, king f7, f3, and retreating the rook, I'm not so sure if I'd be able to win this. So I spent a lot of time debating whether to play rook h4, but then I finally saw another great idea here, which was to sack the knight with knight takes pawn on c4, attacking the rook on e3. White cannot take the pawn on f3 because the doubled rooks protect each other and I win the game, and so Magnus basically has to take the knight. But after queen takes knight, now I can take the pawn, and white cannot capture the pawn on f3 here because you're only attacking it with the rook. So after rook takes pawn, rook takes rook, it's GG, why not? So here Magnus plays rook d3, trying to capture the pawn, and now I have the brutal way to finish off the game with this move queen takes g3, sacking the queen and doing a Botez gambit. But in this case it actually ends the game immediately. Now Magnus really doesn't have any other options. Queen c7 was the move that I expected him to play, but after queen takes c7 I was going to play the very cold-blooded rook h6, intending to create the double sack and mate him on h1. And if white sacks the rook with rook takes pawn, rook takes rook, king g2, I have queen h5 here, and threats like queen h3, queen h2, or even just retreating the rook followed by a queen f3 check win the game. So I was expecting queen c7, but then Magnus played rook d3, and when I sack the queen, Magnus resigns the game here because if he takes the queen I go f2 check, king f1, rook h1 check, king to e2, I promote to a queen, king to d2, and then I have queen c1 check, king e2, and queen to e1, which is checkmate. And if white goes the other way to say g2, I simply promote with checkmate. Same thing after king f1, rook h1, not rook h2, rook h1, king g2, f1 would be gg. So a very, very nice win for me to start off the 3+1 portion. This would tie the match at 5. I would actually go on a big run here. I think I won the next 3 games as well to take a 3-game lead before Magnus was able to stem the tide. He won, I think, 2 games in a row before winning the final game of the 3+1 portion to tie the match up at 9-9. So after the 5+1 portion, I was ahead, or I was down 5-4. I won the 3+1 by 5-4. So the match is all square going into the bullet. Now the bullet was a very topsy-turvy affair the final 30 minutes of the match. I would start off with a win in the first game before Magnus drew the second game. He would then go on a little bit of a streak, winning a couple of games, and then in the second to last game of the match, I would win to move the deficit back to 1 with only 3 minutes on the clock. So let's take a look at this final game of the match. I don't know why the board is wrong, but the board is wrong. Let me refresh this. Hopefully it'll look correct. There we go. I don't know, and I leaked it. Sorry you guys, I leaked it, my bad. Very, very unfortunate. I don't know why it's actually off, but anyway, let's put this back over here and let's go through this final game. So in this game, I'm trailing by a score of 13-12, and Magnus plays e4. Here I play e5, Magnus goes knight to f3, and now I play this move knight to c6, and Magnus very cheekily plays this move knight c3. Now in the entire match, Magnus had been playing the Spanish, but this was great gamesmanship by Magnus to play knight c3. Now in some of my other videos, like on the FIDE World Cup or other events like that, I have mentioned that in a must-win situation with black, one of the biggest reasons you cannot play e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6 is very specifically because of knight c3 with the intention of playing the 4 knights with d4 on the next turn. And at the top level, it's very, very hard to win. So with this being a game where I'm trailing by 1.3 minutes left on the clock, knowing this is probably the last game of the match, I decide to play g6 and try to keep the game going. Magnus plays d4. We trade the pawns on d4, and now I play this move bishop to g7, and here Magnus plays the move bishop e3. Now I go knight g to e7, and Magnus plays queen d2, and I go d6 here. He castles, and I play this move h6. Now h6 is a simple move to stop Magnus from playing something like knight takes knight, and bishop h6, exchanging more pieces off the board. And the reason it's so critical to stop this sequence from happening is that in bullet, even more so than blitz, it gets magnified if one side has easy moves, and here Magnus has easy moves. He has h4, h5, he has f4, f5, a lot of easy plans. I'd figure out on my castling queen side, where am I putting my queen? It's too difficult to play because Magnus's moves will be played instantly. So I play this move h6 here. Magnus goes bishop to e2, and now I play this move bishop to e6 here. The idea is quite simple. What I want to do is go queen d7 and castle my king to the queen side. Here Magnus plays rook he1, which is an interesting move, probably not the absolute best move. I think Magnus, all things considered, probably should trade the knight for the bishop, because at least here with like bishop g4 and queen d7 and f4, it feels easier for white to play once again with these bishops. So instead, Magnus goes rook he1. I play the move queen d7, and now he trades the knights on c6, and I have to take with the knight. If I were to take with the pawn to try and open up the b file, Magnus would simply go bishop d4, trading off another set of pieces. And once again, the moves are too easy for white. I don't have any kind of attack on the b file. There's f5, there's g4. It's all very, very difficult to play. So I take with the knight. Magnus plays knight to d5, and now I decide to play this move a6, stopping bishop b5 and preparing to castle queenside. Magnus goes f4, I castle, and now he plays this move bishop f3, and I play this move king to b8. A quiet move, simply played because if I play, let's say, rook g8, a little bit worried about a move like bishop b6, threatening to win the pawn on c7. If I take the bishop, spaghetti-o, here comes a fork, and I lose the game. So I go king b8, Magnus plays king b1. I go rook h8, he plays bishop f2, and now I play this move rook c8, sidestepping any ideas like bishop to h4 to win the rook on d8. Here Magnus goes bishop h4 anyway, but this now allows me to play this move knight to d4, and Magnus blunders with this move knight to f6. Now when I played rook c8, I did see this idea with bishop h4 and knight d4 and what happens in the game, because knight f6 looks like a very logical move. After we trade the bishops here, I take, and it feels like opposite colored bishops. White should be completely fine, even number of pawns, very good chances to draw the game, but it allows this nasty bishop sacrifice with bishop takes a2, because if white takes the bishop, I have queen e6 check, winning the bishop on f6. Magnus goes king c1, and now I play bishop back to e6, and here the dust is somewhat settled where I have an extra pawn on the board and white has double pawns. On the other hand, it's very hard because I don't really have easy pushes in the center. I can't push d5. White is a queen and rook. c5 will then c5, for example, will c5 will weaken this pawn on d6, so I can't easily push either the d or the c pawns. So if I can't push either the c or d pawns, it's very hard to prove an advantage. Magnus plays h4, I go queen b5, and now he plays the move queen d3. Of course, I play queen a5. I cannot trade the queens for two reasons. First reason is because with only like a minute and a half on the clock, if I trade queens, the game it's definitely going to be the final game of the match. And additionally, I have to win in an opposite color bishop's endgame. And with it being the final game of the match, I'd rather keep queens on because maybe there's a world where I can win this game or even draw the game and get it over with and still have a little bit of time left for another game. So I go queen a5, Magnus plays queen c3, I play queen h5, he goes b3, and now I play king a8, king b2, and I play this move queen b5, simply trying to do something. Here Magnus plays h5, an excellent move, because if I take with the pawn, now white has f5, and these pawns are really harassing the bishop. I have to go back to d7, but now white can go queen d2, try to gobble either the pawn at h5 or h6, and I still don't have any way to push pawns in the center of the board. So I play queen takes h5, Magnus plays rook h1, which is a mistake. f5 would have drawn the game here because after pawn takes pawn and rook h1, queen g6, white has rook d to g1, and suddenly my queen is in a lot of trouble. After queen h7, rook g7, and queen h8, there's rook takes f7, queen g8, and even rook takes c7 here, and white should never ever lose this position. Luckily for me, Magnus plays rook to h1, I go queen b5 back, he takes the pawn on h6, and now I can start to try and push p on the queen side with a5 and b6 and maybe a4 down the road. Magnus plays rook g1 here, hoping to go rook g5, so I play b6, rook g5, and now I go c5 here with multiple pawn pushes, either c4 or a4 in the position, and at this point I felt like I had a really good chance to win this game. So here Magnus plays rook to h2, I go a4, trying to open up the protection around the white king. Magnus plays rook to d2, and now I decide to trade the pawns and play king b7 with the idea of double stacking on the a file. Here Magnus plays rook takes d6, I go rook to a8, and now it's looking really good for me because of the exact reason I mentioned before, where all of my moves are essentially reactions to whatever white does. My plan is very simple: double stack and mate on the a file, go queen f1 and mate on a1. It's very easy for me to play, and Magnus has to prove it. So here Magnus plays f5, and now I play this move queen f1 instantly. This was a huge mistake by me. In this position, what I needed to do was slow down. Now the time control is 1+1, so there's an increment, but it's very difficult because once you're moving very quickly, knowing when to stop and slow down is extremely tricky, especially if you're just moving instantly up to that point. Now I had 32 seconds on the clock here, and I very firmly believe if I'd been able to slow down and think for like 5 or 6 seconds, I probably would have traded the pawns here and gone bishop takes b3, which is winning the game on the spot here, because white can't check on d7, the queen covers a square, and after white takes the bishop, I have rook e2 check, king c3, and rook e3, winning this queen on b3, and it's simply GG. And if white doesn't take the bishop, I have both rook e2, I have rook a2, the white king is completely open, and in a bullet game, just zero chances of saving it. So instead I play queen f1. I would say I played this sort of out of like inertia. Is it inertia? Maybe that's the wrong word, but I just was playing this, trying to move fast, trying to press Magnus on the clock and going for some kind of checkmate. So I play queen f1, Magnus takes this bishop on e6, and now I play this move rook a1, which is a horrible move. Now the thing is, when Magnus was thinking here after queen f1, I was really worried about what to do after fe6, and I simply did not see a forced win after queen a1. Now again here, if I had used maybe 5-6 seconds, sort of got my bearings about me, I think there's a very good chance that I would have seen that after rook to a2, king d3, and queen d1, king e3, I can simply take the rook and I should be winning the game. But the problem is, while I was calculating this line, Magnus did take the bishop, and all I saw was queen e2, king e3, and I thought like queen e2, king f4, and there's no checkmate here. So if I used a little bit of time, or maybe if Magnus had used an extra second or two, I could have maybe worked out the exact sequence, and I would have probably played queen to a1, because after king c2, rook a2, the best move for white here is to play queen b2, or not rook b2, sorry, I play rook takes e6 because the queen is still pinned, and after takes queen a2 and bishop b2, I can simply play a move like queen a6 with the idea of queen to e2, and there should be no fortress here. Instead, I play rook to a1, and now Magnus blunders right back with queen to c2, trying to stop checkmate and 1 on b1. Now here, if Magnus had sacked the rook with rook takes b6, this would have been completely winning for white, because if I take the rook, white can go queen c5, king b7, queen b4 check, and now white can check with rook c5 or rook a5, take the pawn on f7. This king is completely open on b7, and it's a simple GG, why not? So after rook b6, I probably would have had to go king a7, but the very cold-blooded move queen to d2 is simply winning for white, because after queen b1, king c3, there simply are no checks, and now I'm getting mated on the d file here, and white will win very shortly. Instead, Magnus plays queen c2, returning the favor, and now I blunder with this move, rook to a8. Now in this position, rook to a2 would have been a fantastic move here, checking the king and sacking the rook, because if white takes the rook, I have rook a8 check, king b2, and then queen to a1, which would simply be checkmate. So white has to go king c3 here, and after takes, and rook e6, once again, this endgame should simply be winning for black. Alas, I don't find it. Instead, I play rook a8, again, trying to play on inertia, move really fast. If I used a little bit of time, I could have sat on my hands for 5 seconds. I think there was a very good chance I would have played it, but Magnus was getting low on time, and I saw that the clock here was actually out. So I saw that the clock was down to like 3 or 2 seconds. So I was feeling really excited, really feeling like I had to win this game on the spot. So I play rook e8, and again, Magnus misses this idea with rook takes b6, which would have been winning here. Instead, he plays rook d7. I go king c6, and for a split second here, I thought that I was actually going to win the game. But Magnus finds a double rook sack by sacking the rook on c5, and after takes, he plays rook to c7, a double sacrifice. I take, Magnus takes on c5, and here I did see the clock had hit 0, and so after king b7, queen d5, I'm like, it's just a draw. So I went king b8, bishop e5. I offered a draw, I think, after king b8, and Magnus, I think, played the move and then accepted the draw because he also saw the timer had run out. Now, amazingly, this is actually a forced checkmate. I didn't see the checkmate. I just assumed that there's some kind of repetition with queen d6, queen d7, and if there's a repetition, there's nothing I can do. I don't think Magnus saw it either, but we both saw that the clock had hit 0 at this point. So after the check, Magnus accepted my draw offer, although white does have a forced checkmate here, because after king c8, there's queen d7, which is checkmate, and if I go king a7, there's bishop d4, king b8, queen d8 check, king b7, queen d7 check. If king b8, bishop e5 is mate, and if I go king a6, there's queen c6 check, king a5, and then queen b6 would simply be checkmate because the king has no squares. So very choppy back and forth final game. Again, I wish I could have sat on my hands, maybe thought for 5 or 6 seconds at the critical moments. Alas, I was not able to. And with that, Magnus wins the match by a score of 13.5 to 12.5. Pretty much as close of a match as it could be. He won the 5+1 portion. I won the 3+1 portion. He wins the 1+1 portion by 1 game. Every section was decided by 1 game. So it was an extremely close match. Again, I had some chances, maybe in the 3+1, maybe here in this final game to win and force overtime. At any rate, it wasn't meant to be. Magnus wins this match. He wins his 3rd Speed Chess Championship title. Unfortunately, I'm still stuck on 5, but alas, it was a great match, and I hope all of you guys enjoyed this recap. So if you guys have not already subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button below, and I will be back after I play Magnus Carlsen, or I'll be back with more YouTube only content after I play Magnus Carlsen on Monday in the Chess Champions Tour event. Now that will of course be a rapid format. I believe 15 minutes was a slight increment, but I will do a recap after that match for all of you guys who are watching here on YouTube. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed this recap. If you weren't watching the match live, definitely go take a look. Truly an epic match, and probably my favorite match that I played in the SCC, outside of maybe the match against Ding, I think 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So great match, a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I came up short, but very competitive up until the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll be back very soon. See you guys. Bye.